Hello, here today to do, finally, a video about something a little different. And here I am in my traditional happy summer tank top. And no, I am not hungover, as some of you sometimes think I am. Today, my allergies are just killing me. So, so I look more busted than I actually am. So today I want to talk to you about a new spread, actually, that I did finally come up with. I know that some of you have asked me to do this, and I said that I don't really have anything that I use other than the Celtic cross and the opening of the key. And even the opening of the key, I prefer to do it more for myself than for other people, just because it tends to be a little spotty for other people. And that's just my end, I think, and perfecting a technique for that has proven difficult. So I was thinking about how I like to read, and you guys know that I have my little technique of resonance with when I use the Celtic cross. I like to look for the patterns in the cards and look at the different significances that exist between them, and I use that to evaluate basically what the meaning or the deeper meaning or whatnot is about the reading or situation. So I was thinking about ways I could expand upon that. And I came up with this kind of interesting way yesterday, and I've played around with it a few times. And I'm actually kind of happy with how it came out. So I thought I'd share it with you and see if you guys have any luck with it. I'm going to move my little camera here, which is always a pain in the butt, but this is how it is. And hopefully I can get this so that you can see. So what I did, I also recently, and I hope the sound is better on this video. I apologize for the sound on the last video. But, oh God, I hope you all aren't suffering through allergies as I have been. But I recently bought the Tarot Illuminati by Eric Dunn, and I like it quite a bit. I think it's a nice alternative to the Rider-Waite, while still being Rider-Waite-ish. I don't, I really, as I've said on previous videos, I hate Pamela Coleman Smith's artwork. I think it's ugly. From an aesthetic perspective, I absolutely hate it. So this is kind of nice, I think. It's a little too ornate in some ways, but part of me also kind of likes that. And it's digital without looking cheesy. I have bought Cairo Marchetti's decks before, which, like his Gilded Tarot and Legacy of the Divine Tarot, and I like them, but there's something that looks a little cheap about them. And these, I don't know what it is about them, if it's just the ornateness or something, but these are in the same kind of digital style without looking tacky. That's important, I think. I mean, your tarot cards shouldn't look like, I don't know, cartoony or fake or anything like that. So anywho, I decided to use this deck to show you today, this new spread. And I don't really have a name for it yet, the spread. I've been toying around with like the web or something, but that's kind of cliche. So, but basically what I did was I asked a fairly general question. In this case, I asked a question regarding this summer choir that I'm working with. And I asked just a general, what's going on with it and what should I do with it? And I just shuffled, I cut 3 times, and then I fanned them out, and I picked 10 random cards that I felt drawn to, which I don't usually do when I read, but I've been toying around with using that more lately. And so the cards that I came up with, I'll just leave those aside for now. The cards that I ended up getting were Judgment, Temperance, the Prince of Wands, the Queen of Wands, the Seven of Wands, Four of Wands, 10 Fortune, or the Wheel in this case, the Two of Swords, Four of Cups, and the Princess of Pentacles. Now, if you've noticed, I've got them arranged elementally already. But originally they weren't like that. They did not come to me in that order, of course. So I just kind of spread them out and tried to look for patterns between them and different significances that they share. And I think that's really all you do at first. So the first pair, or the first connection that I noticed immediately, of course, was the Prince of Wands and the Queen of Wands. So I immediately, again, this camera is really not good for doing something like this, but I set them aside at the top to start. And usually I start by grouping mostly elementally so that you can kind of see the basic underlying patterns. And as you'll see, the Princess of Pentacles, the Four of Cups, are the two cards that really don't have a strong connection to the reading as of yet. Okay, whereas the Wheel is connected to the Two of Swords through the element of air, and then we see this tremendous amount of fire in the rest of the cards. So, what I did from there is then thinking that the Four of Wands being an Aries card, the Queen of Wands being an Aries card, I stuck those together, and the Prince of Wands being traditionally a Leo card, and the Seven of Wands being a Leo card, I stuck those together. So now we have this little V that, this little V that's forming up here. Okay, and we still have the Wheel and Two of Swords kind of all off to the side. Then I put my two major arcana, my two fire majors, Judgment and Temperance, together because they're of the same caliber, they're of the same kind of strength, and they're both major arcanas, and they're both fire. Now, Judgment is a little more fundamentally fire than Temperance, because of course Judgment represents the element of fire and the element of spirit. So I sort of put that at the bottom here and Temperance above it. And what we get is, interestingly enough, this pretty basic V kind of tree shape with Temperance in the middle, which I thought was very interesting since that basically is the symbolic representation of Temperance. And of course, you know, you lay them out really in whatever way your intuition sees fit. I mean, this is how I organized my fire cards based on how I felt they were supposed to go. If that's not how you want to organize them, I mean, really, there are many more ways of. I don't want to say there's an infinite number of ways because there really isn't, but there are many other ways that you could organize your fire cards. But for now, I think for the meaning of what I have here, because of the presence of Temperance here and Judgment, this seemed to make the most sense. So now, after doing that, I like to then go across elements and look for connections that way. Now, we'll start with the Four of Cups. Four of Cups is the Moon in Cancer, and really it does not share any similarity with any of these fire cards. There is no other lunar influence in the fire cards that would connect it to them. The only thing that it shares any similarity with is the Four of Wands, actually, and it's a loose one through its number. So I also tend to group by numbers as well. It's another way that you can form relationships. So I don't necessarily put them flush. I put them sort of semi-flush next to each other because there is a slight connection between them. It's sort of a fundamental connection, but it isn't necessarily a particularly strong one. There's, in my opinion anyway, if you want to read it as a real firm connection, you can. I tend to focus more on the astrological and elemental connections as being slightly more important than the numerological ones. Excuse me. But you can do that differently if you so choose. For now, I guess I'll put them flush just to make the point that they're connected. Now, the number 4, if we think, is associated with Chesed on the Tree of Life, and the number 4 is associated, therefore, with the planet Jupiter And we have the planet Jupiter in this reading in the form of the Wheel of Fortune. So I would stick this as sort of connecting the Four of Wands and the Four of Cups and sort of being the basis for both of them. And then being an air card, the Two of Swords goes underneath the wheel, uh, like so. Okay. Then that leaves us with the Princess of Pentacles, sort of all alone and isolated, and we don't quite know what to do with her because she doesn't fit in with anything. Now, in other times I've used this spread over the past 24 hours, they're most of them fully connected in some way. This is the first one I've done actually that I was left with something that didn't fit in at all. It just really didn't. I mean, I suppose you could look at the Princess of Pentacles from an astrological perspective and see her as, I believe it's Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Aquarius. Is that right? Or is it, no, I think it's, sorry, I think it's the signs that revolve around Taurus. That's what it is. So it would be Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, technically. And so I suppose she has a slight loose connection up here to the Queen of Wands, if you want to think of it that way. I kind of, in this case, see her more as disconnected, just because the Princess of Pentacles, I mean, you so rarely think about the astrological associations of the Princess of Pentacles, of any princess for that matter, that it is a very weak a weak connection at best. The Princess of Pentacles is more directly connected to the Ace of Pentacles, which is not here, and there are no other Earth cards to ground her in this reading. So she has a very slight affinity to the Queen of Wands. Other than that, she's fairly disconnected. So from here, we would sort of read this situation as I would read it, beginning with Judgment, and see that Judgment is sort of the basis of this intense amount of creativity that we have here. So clearly this is a creative endeavor. There's a lot of fire and energy going on here, a lot of creation, a lot of passion, a lot of big ideas. And it is the foundation of all of that is Judgment, which is part of my personal goal. I interpret that as my personal goal to sort of revitalize the music program at this current location, and to sort of bring a spirit of change in through this summer program. So that's very accurately the basis of my situation. And again, none of this is positional. I'm going to read this entirely based on intuition, really, while also focusing on the technical connections. So hypothetically, this reading is a perfect fusion of both. So, I'm sorry, I keep sniffing. As I said, my allergies are horrible. So from there, we can see that Judgment is expressing itself most directly in the form of Temperance. And it's Temperance that is mostly a balance between the Prince of Wands and the Queen of Wands. So we can see them as basically being the same person. I think that Temperance here is less about the collecting of forces, though it does have some significance in this case. That is accurate. I think in this case, based on this this pattern that we've created, it is also saying that the Prince of Wands and the Queen of Wands represents the same person, which I interpret to be me, and that's because those two cards, I have a real history with those cards. I have a strong resonance with those cards. Those are big aspects of my personality, and particularly when in my relation to my job, my career, and my music and my musical goals. So I can then trace them as and see them as acting. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. As acting in different ways. So the Prince of Wands I can see as having excuse me again, as having a more of an aggressive tone through the Seven of Wands. The Prince of Wands is a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more challenging, a little bit more difficult to deal with. The Queen of Wands is a little more gentle. With the Four of Wands, she's a little more lovable, perhaps a little more approachable, but also a little bit more, uh, what's the word I want? I suppose a little more friendly in a way. So Temperance is showing me that I, in this role, have managed to sort of balance my need to push and challenge people, which I consider a big part of my true will, uh, my need to push and challenge people with my innate ability to attract people and bring people together. So I can see that this is working very well in my favor, that I for the most part, am acting in the way that I should, for at least myself. And so that's positive. Now, what seems to be going on in the outside, because the air cards don't really have a strong connection to the fire cards. It has a loose connection to, excuse me, to the Four of Wands and the Four of Cups. And so I would say that environmentally speaking, or outside of myself, there's a lot of change going on in this situation, which is very true. I've had a lot of people, quit last minute, or come in last minute, music coming last minute. There have been a lot of upheavals to the start of this program. It has not had a very smooth start. And so on one hand, the strongest effect that that has had is represented by the Two of Swords over here, um, which I see as sort of an impeding of progress, and kind of an uncertainty of where it's going to go on the part of a lot of people. I'm not sure that anyone really knows how to have an opinion of where this is going to go yet, because all the pieces have yet to come together, which is a problem. Even though Temperance seems to be saying that I am putting things together, unless it's saying that I'm focusing more on myself and putting myself together in an organized fashion than I am the external details, which would probably also be true knowing myself. I'm horrible with logistics and horrible with details, and I hate them. They bore the pants off me, and so I have a tendency in life, which is really bad, to ignore them and not deal with them. And so at the same time, while things seem to be kind of friendly and good and are on the road to establishment, because people generally, I think, in this case, like me and like my leadership because of the Queen of Wands influence here and the Four of Wands, I think there's also sort of a kind of not quite happy part about this. It's sort of like a blah feeling about it, in the form of the Four of Cups. And on one hand, that represents me. I very much feel that right now. But I think it also, being connected to the wheel, which we've determined is sort of an outside influence, I think that that's also probably a representation of how my choir members are feeling at the moment as well. Sort of like, just we're not quite sure if what we got ourselves into is really what we want to do for the summer, if it's a little too overwhelming. And that's something that I really need to reevaluate, and I need to try to come up with ways probably to make this more fun. So that's another thing. I think in terms of deciding advice for yourself or for whoever you're reading for, I think you want to focus, and this is how I read it with the Celtic Cross, with this technique. You want to focus on the cards that seem lost or disconnected, and think about how you can bring them into the situation, into more harmony with whatever energy is present. So, thinking about it that way, because again, this is not a reading that particularly has a chronology. It really is a way more, in the way that we kind of use the first operation of the opening of the key, it's more of a way of determining a flow of energy in the current moment. And sometimes you will get a chronology, like I did a reading last night with this technique where it had a very clear progression and chronology. And in that case, if your intuition is telling you to interpret them as a chronology, either because the cards flow up in a very linear fashion or what have you, or they flow in, there are many ways that you can create flows. And I think it's up to you to determine how to interpret that. It's a very, very organic idea and organic spread. So I really encourage you to play with it and see what works for you. So now the last thing that we have is the Princess of Pentacles. And I asked, how can I bring her into this situation better? Because she's definitely the weakest card here. And I see her as my choir members in terms of having potential, but basically still being students and still having a lot to learn, and perhaps not dealing particularly well with the amount of the tremendous amount of enthusiasm that I am bringing to this. It might be a little overwhelming for them. So what I did was I just fanned out my cards again, and I picked a card to connect it. And the card I got, sort of sadly, was the Nine of Swords. Now, to determine where this connects, the Nine of Swords is Mars in Gemini, and the only other card here with a particularly strong Mars influence is the Seven of Wands. So what we have here is the Princess of Pentacles connected to the Seven of Wands via the Nine of Swords. Okay, so then we would say that the Princess of Pentacles, the way she is relating to this situation is she's feeling stressed out. She's feeling anxious and nervous because of the Prince of Wands and his overbearingness and the difficulty of the stuff that I have selected. That is very accurate for describing the situation. So that tells me that I really need to tone down the level of the rep, tone down my approach to the rep, and try to simplify it as much as possible. And so I asked one more time, how can I make this a little less scary for them, and what can I do to make this easier for them? And I did the same thing. I fanned out through a random card, and I got the King of Cups. So I would say that this is my overall solution card to this situation and this problem, and I would put the King of Cups there. And I would say, because I sort of see him as a middle road between the Prince of Wands and the Queen of Wands. So, while the Prince of Wands is very determined and eager and over-enthusiastic, and the Queen of Wands is more, a little more friendly, a little warmer, a little bit better with people, I suppose. The King of Cups is more gentle. Also very good with people, but is a little more understanding and a little more compassionate, also a little bit more expressive. So it's a way of maintaining the level of artistry that I want while still being compassionate. So, and I think also being a watery male card, there's an amount of flexibility there in the King of Cups that the Prince of Wands does not usually have, particularly when he's aspected by the Seven of Wands. I'm being too stubborn here, and I'm being too challenging and too difficult for the people that I have. And so I do need to try to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more understanding, and a little bit more compassionate. And the other thing about the King of Cups is that I kind of have a personal association with him and Jupiter for some reason. And I don't know if that's because I sometimes see Pisces as having like a Jupiterian-esque influence, even though I don't believe it actually does. And again, I can't quite remember, to be honest with you. But so for me, there's sort of a slight relationship between the King of Cups and the Wheel, which is another sort of problem that I've been having. The King of Cups you could also see him as sort of Cancerian, and he's partially then therefore connected to the Four of Cups. Either way, he's connected to the Four of Cups through the element of water, and that's very important because I do need to, as we said before, bring a greater amount of happiness, a greater amount of fun and pleasure to this situation, and by being more of a King of Cups in this situation, I might be able to tap into that more and bring that into the situation instead of focusing so much on the work aspect of it. If I can focus more on the social aspect, perhaps, that might alleviate some tension that my people are feeling. Okay? And so that's and the Nine of Swords, if we continue thinking about it that way, the Nine of Swords then would connect to the Wheel and the Two of Swords through the element of air. And so we might say that right now they're sort of not expressing that tension, but that tension certainly exists. They're sort of covering it up at the moment and not expressing it particularly well. But it is definitely there, and it is a problem that I need to address. And if I don't address it, the situation could easily collapse. Because the Nine of Swords is a fairly strong influence between having Mars and having Mars, the Mars aspect of it exacerbated by my action through the Prince of Wands. But it's also a 9, and 9s are very strong. So, and you could look at it that way too, you know, you could look at the numbers here. The number 4 is fairly strong here, and 4 is not always a great number. It's a very structured number, and it is not particularly flexible. And so the King of Cups, again, reminding me to be more flexible here. Oh gosh, I think I need to go take a clarinet. But anywho, that's about it. That's what I came up with. And it is very organic. No reading is really going to look the same. And if you see any pictures, you know, any patterns or pictures that you see that you want to talk about in your interpretation, I highly encourage that. Like, for instance, I could see this as a real kind of surge of fire energy, and the Four of Cups is sort of more like a trickle-off effect. It's not really a huge part of the fire energy here. It's almost like an after effect and an afterthought. And the result of that is this kind of mishigas, this sort of all sorts of stuff coming up, and nothing really fitting together in a puzzle piece like way yet. So yeah, I'm probably going to have to do a few more examples of this just to show you some additional parts of the technique, because I don't think I've explained the real technique particularly well here, and I apologize for that. But basically what you're doing is you're just looking for patterns, and you're organizing your cards based on astrological, elemental, numerological, Kabbalistic patterns. Whatever way you can create patterns and associations between the cards through your mental network of associations, whatever linguistic system you use to interpret the tarot, use that to create patterns, and then intuitively describe those patterns and how they flow into each other, how they affect each other, what sort of dynamics exist between those patterns that you create, and are there things that are wildly disconnected, are there things that are sort of connected, and are there things that are super connected, like in this case the fire is very well connected here. And then based on whatever you have questions about or whatever you want to bring stronger into the situation, you draw extra cards, try to fit them in that way. If they still don't fit, I would continue drawing cards until you have a clearer sense of how to incorporate that energy into whatever reading you're doing. Okay. Whew. So that's about it. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'd love to see if you guys can try this and see if you have any luck with it. Again, it's totally non-positional. I highly recommend not coming up with positions for it. I just don't think that is particularly helpful. So, yeah. So let me know what you think, and other than that, I'll see you around. Bye.